Who's there?
Alabar, from the village. I must speak with you. Let me in.
Go away.
No, I cannot go away. I am the king of the bean. Inside the hut there was a laugh, or the ancient animal ancestor of a laugh. A cackle wound like prickly yarn around the wild spindle in the throat of a fox.
You have strayed from your kingdom, your majesty. I am not subject to your authority. In fact, go frig yourself.
Alabar leaned against the shaman's door. Never had he been so near to weeping. If only he had his beard back so that it might sop up the tears. You don't understand. I am not playing games. I am not one of the peasants. I am a king.
So you informed me, King of the Bean. Go swill another cup of cider, your highness. And don't forget to ask the priest for forgiveness when you kneel in church on the morrow.
Alabar bashed the door down with one furious lunge. He careened inside, sending broken sticks flying, and lifted the shaman from his mattress. Without a painted deer skull over his head, the old man did not seem so formidable. Alabar shook him until his various necklaces of various teeth chattered like a flock of enamel jays.
All right, said the shaman. What are you seeking? Information or wisdom?
Wisdom.
In that case, you're out of luck. Wisdom takes a long time, and you're going to be dead in 12 days.
Alabar threw the shaman onto his stick.
No, I am not, he screamed, stamping his feet. No, I am not. Oh, you're not? But you're a king and thus condemned.
The shaman grinned like a weasel running errands for the moon. I am twice king and twice condemned, and I am sick and tired of it. First a hare and then a bean. If death wants me, let him ride up on a pale mount, ashes in his mouth, ice in his testicles. Let him swing a scythe and make horrible noises. Let him come for me in person, not send some hare, some fucking little black bean baked in a goodie by mutton butt peasant wives. Even then I might not go. Frankly, I do not like the way death does business. A glimmer of interest showed in the shaman's eyes. He raised himself on his knobby hips. He glanced at the snow that was sifting over the contents of his hut.
Do you feel a bit of a draft? Here, help me hang this skin over the door. Then I'll brew us some mushroom tea, and we can discuss your problem.
While his host hunkered over the diminutive adobe hearth, Alabar sniffed at the various braids of dried vegetable matter that hung against the walls, each broadcasting a different version of internal conditions within the plant kingdom. And he fingered the bones, fangs, and snail shells that, like chimes to be rung by the shaman's heavy breathing, dangled from the ceiling. Each fragment of flora and fauna had been removed from its original context and juxtaposed incongruously, yet each seemed perfectly in place. The party in Alabar's head, which agitation and anxiety were throwing, now was crashed by a notion. Existence can be rearranged. Torn between showing this thought to the door or seating it in a place of honor, Alabar was relieved of the dilemma by a steaming teacup shoved into his grasp. The shaman sipped ritualistically. Alabar told his whole story. When only the dregs were left of the one's tea and the other's tail, the shaman took several short pieces of string from his pocket and began to knot them together, mumbling all the while. In my net I bind the sobs of the dark ice cracking. In my net I bind the axe's response to the pine cone. I bind the larva's curved belly.
I bind the hole in the sky where the comets escape. I bind the roots of the rainbow and the flight of the alder. He went on and on in that manner. My net binds the hornet's deaf grandmother, until Alabar was ready to grab him and give him another shaking. Just as Alabar reached the end of his patience, the shaman unclasped his hands, revealing the pieces of string, which in the knotting had turned into a delicate violet, its petals the color of love bites on a collarbone. Alabar reached for the flower, but it burst into flame and was consumed in the shaman's fingers without burning them. It was Alabar's turn to mumble. In the future, I shall be more careful about whose door I knock down, he said, mopping up with his sleeve the tea he had spilled in his astonishment. The shaman laughed. Don't pay any attention to that old magic, he said. It used to be powerful, but now it is only the pastime of a few crazy old farts who remember how to talk with weeds. Alabar sought to protest, but the shaman interrupted. Man is turning away from the plants and animals, he said. Slowly he is breaking his bond with them. Someday he will have to re-establish contact if the universe is to survive. For now, however, it is probably best that he set out on his own in his new direction. How so? A salamander can only be a salamander, an elk, and a bush. A bush. True, a bush is complete in its bushness, yet its limits, while not nearly so severe as some foolish men would believe, are fairly obvious. The peasants of Elfric are like bushes, like salamanders. They were born one thing and will die one thing, but you have already been a warrior, a king, and a serf, and from the looks of it, you aren't through yet. Thus, you have learned the secret of the new direction. That is, a man can be many things, maybe anything. In the past, there was little separation between the lives of plants and animals and the lives of men. Nowadays, there are men who practice separation, not only from the creatures, but from other men. The Romans, with their Christianity, have promoted the idea of the human individual. But you are neither Roman nor Christian, and you are no less smitten, so perhaps the spirit is in the air. The Romans encourage individualism, but they maintain rigid controls. Sooner or later, men will come along whose belief in the supremacy of the exceptional, extraordinary, isolated individual will cause them to declare themselves exempt from controls. In their uniqueness, they will not hesitate to defy accepted standards. Oh, these men will give Rome, and the Romes that shall follow Rome, a very large headache. You, Alabar, I suspect, are among the first of such men. No, do not object. I can tell that my words both delight and excite you. It was true. And in his delightment and excitement, Alabar had let his tea grow cold, so the shaman warmed his cup. Were you an ordinary peasant, I would dazzle you with another trick or two. I'd berate you and comfort you, and send you back to Elfric to face your death without alarm. Most of the peasants are content to die. For them, death means a cessation of toil. At last, they can drop their soiled and battered bodies and enter the dimension of pure spirit. Plants and animals are even more comfortable with death. It is the natural end, but man, by his nature, is an unnatural animal. If any creature stands a chance of defeating death, it is man. If you were an ordinary serf, I would send you back to Elfric to assist your neighbors in the public purification they undergo at the end of the old year and the beginning of the new,
to help them mock the things they love best in order that they might revere them the more. I'd send you back to where the sacred mistletoe, to be king of the bean, to be sacrificed to the good old goddess of agriculture. Instead, I encourage you to ride this strange wind that is blowing through you, to ride to wherever it will carry you. But which way should I go? That is between you and the wind. You seem to be searching for a kind of immortality. With that, I cannot help you. In the realms I inhabit, death is a companion. One does not quarrel with one's friend. If you desire to meet masters with power over death, I suggest you travel to the distant east. As far as Hellas? Far, far beyond Hellas. To Egypt, then. In Alabar's mind, Egypt, with its confounding mirrors, was the end of the trolley line. As far as Egypt is, you must go 3 times that far. 3 times farther than Egypt? Are you trying to trick me? I would fall over the edge of the earth. The shaman snorted with laughter. Alabar, the earth does not have an edge. It was Alabar's turn to laugh. He thought he might be in the company of a crazy old fart after all. What utter nonsense, he declared. You are a free and special man, Alabar. Therefore, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Listen, I converse regularly with the birds and the fish, and the birds and the fish have assured me many times that there isn't an edge. We live on a ball, Alabar. We do. Keep this quiet. The world is round. So heady was the idea that Alabar felt faint. He gulped his tea and gazed into the shaman's eyes, eyes as shiny and black as the bean in the cake, to ascertain that he was not being joshed. When he was convinced of the shaman's sincerity, he stood and gathered his hides about him. I suppose I should be off then. I suppose you should. I surmise that several feasts of feasts will be consumed ere I am returned. However, I should be pleased to build you a strong new door when next I pass this way. You plan to return then? If the world be round, I can scarcely help it, he chuckled. Some day I should like to mingle with my clan again, even if I must disguise myself to do so. The shaman shook his head. I have it on good authority that Lord Elfric's men are going to attack your old citadel as soon as the roads are dry in spring. They will kill all who resist and baptize the remainder. Long before you return, if you return, the dependent city you once ruled will be but another Roman outpost on the frontiers of the Holy Empire. Alabar smacked his palm with his fist. Then I must warn the clan. I'll organize a defense. Maybe we'll attack first. By the golden whiskers of the morning star, we'll show those turnip eaters what battle's about. They'll need more than one god to save their asses ere I and my boys are through, blah, blah, blah. Too late, Alabar, too late. As if to somehow illustrate his point, the shaman tore a badger mask from the wall and tossed it into the fire. The foe is not merely Lord Elfric, but the whole of the empire. It is too large, too entrenched, has too much momentum. The world is changing, Alabar. He gestured at the burning mask. Don't waste your life trying to hold back the tides of history. History begot Rome, and history someday will bury it. In the meantime, you've other fish to fry. Have you forgotten? Are you to be an individual, a trespasser in territory none else has had the wit or nerve to explore? Or just another troublesome mosquito to be swatted by the authorities? You're no longer king or warrior, remember, but something new.
It will do your clansmen no good for you to be slain alongside them, but who can guess what benefits may result from a new life wholly led? You are correct, said Alabar. He sighed. The clan, its lusty women and its noble hounds, lies behind me. It is forward I must go. After embracing the old man, he marched out into the snow. He aimed his boots at the east and forced his heels to follow his toes. Quickly, the little hut of the shaman was out of view. Out of sight, too, was the village and the manor. Frohl must suspect that I am taking swift advantage of my beanship, straddling another's thighs at this late hour, he thought. He sensed that he was causing her some pain, and that in turn hurt him. He would miss Frohl and the babies, perhaps more intensely than he missed Wren and Mick. But there was a strange wind blowing through him, was there not? Was it not blowing him away? The sky was a velvety black paw, pressing on the white landscape with a feline delicacy. Stars flying like sparks from its fur. The cry of an owl brooding over its ruby appetites cut through the frigid air like a vibrating pin. Then all was silent, except for the soft crunch, like ants chewing wax, of his boots upon the snow. His steps quickened. They took up a gay rhythm. He was very nearly dancing across the frozen fields. The world is round, he sang in tune with his footfalls. Existence can be rearranged. A man can be many things. I am special and free. And the world is round, round, round. A few weeks later, Alabar was awakened by a hot sun in his face and a hot stench in his nostrils. He sat up in the grass and rubbed his eyes. Don't ask where the rest of that dream went, Alabar. All dreams continue in the beyond. The warm sunlight gave him a lazy, comfortable, lie around all morning and scratch your armpits feeling. But inside his nose the cilia were waving, the turbinates were knocking, and the sphenoethmoidal recess was on red alert. By Woden's honeypots, what a scent! Nearby, a flock was grazing, and Alabar guessed the aroma must be its fault. But fie on wool and a pox on mutton, if sheep were so rude to the proboscis. Perhaps in warm climates, sheep take on the odor of their cousins, thought Alabar, for surely it was the essence of goat that permeated his nasal passages, and rutting goat at that. With the flock so close, there must be a shepherd in the vicinity. Maybe I can talk him out of a few crumbs of breakfast ere I get me to a prettier smelling place. Alabar went to rise, but something snagged his cloak and pulled him back down. Again he tried to stand. Again he was yanked to the sod. He reached behind him to free himself from the branch or vine that held him, but he touched nothing. Scooting forward a few feet on his rump, he made another attempt at rising, and another, each with the same result. Angry and a little frightened, he drew his knife and, still sitting, whirled around. There was no one behind him. With all of the elastic in his leg muscles, he snapped himself upward. Thud! Down he went like a sack of meteorites addressed special delivery to gravity. This time he just sat there, fingering his blade, giving every sheep on the hillside a good look at his expression of frustration, bewilderment, and humiliation. Nearly a quarter of an hour passed before very slowly, centimeter by centimeter, sinew by sinew, he commenced cautiously to draw himself upright. And he made it! He was standing! He stretched,
expelled a sigh of relief that fluttered the lashes of a ewe 20 yards away, and strode off, only in mid-stride to fall flat on his new growth of beard. An outburst of wild, magnificent laughter resounded over the hillside and echoed from the crags in the distance. Wild laughter, because its notes were outside the range of the normal human voice, and so uninhibited as to make the shaman's cackle seem fettered. Magnificent laughter, because it seemed huge in scope and rare in distribution. Laughter that was simultaneously strange and familiar, and that instilled in Alabar the fear of the unknown and the joy of self-recognition. It was laughter that might have been squeezed from the tubes of his own darkest heart, then amplified 50 times through the bellows of a loon's ass. The laughter evidently affected the sheep, for all at once they began to bleat and kick, the oldest rams in the flock cavorting as if they were lambs. A breeze suddenly raked the landscape, drawing from the grasses a dark murmuring and setting the thistle bushes to chattering like thin teeth. Bees abandoned the gorse to fly in crazy circles a few feet above ground, while the birdsong that previously had gladdened the hillside lowered appreciably in volume, its capricious trills and whistles replaced by a consistent melodic line, almost reverent in tone. The unease that Alabar experienced was as piercing as a thorn, yet there was a pleasant tightening in his groin, and his limbs felt ticklish and kinetic, inspired beyond his control to join the flock in its awkward dance. The way he found himself moving horizontally through the grass made him wonder if he had not been seized by the serpent power, if there were not an edge after all, and if he were not dangerously close to it. "Hey!" a voice called out. "Why doth thou crawl about on thy belly? Art thou a man or a worm?" Compelled by the voice, which was both dreadful and jolly, threatening and seductive, Alabar forgot his recent failures and scrambled to his feet. "Where are you?" he asked in a shaky falsetto. "Why are you laughing?" "I am everywhere," the voice boomed. "And why shouldn't a god laugh at the puny endeavors of a man?" It was then that Alabar's battle-trained vision focused on the leer in the leaves. At first the leer was all that he could see, but then he caught sight of a shaggy tail and realized that it was connected to the leer. The tailbone frequently is connected to the leer bone, though today that connection is illegal in 17 states and the District of Columbia. In a moment, the bushes parted, and into the pasture pranced an unbelievable creature, all woolly and goat-like from its waist down to its hooves. Human and masculine above, or to be precise, human above save for a pair of stubby horns thrusting like bronze-tipped beet diggers in the bright mountain air. You are the horned one," stammered Alabar. The creature gamboled closer, dispelling any doubts about the origin of the stench. "In some places they know me as that. Hereabouts they call me Pan." He paused. "Those who still honor me, that is." He paused again. "And who might thou be? And what is thy mission?" "Alabar, once king, once serf, now individual. Have you heard of individuals? Free and hungry, at your service. My mission? Well, frankly, I am running away from death." Pan's hooves, which had been pawing the turf in an almost drunken little fandango, became gradually immobile, and the leer slowly slid off his face as if some weak but persistent hand had shoved it. His thick lips dipped downward in a solemn arc, and in his goatish eyes woe replaced mischief. "I too," he said. "What's that?" asked Alabar. "Art thou so famished that thou cannot hear? I said that I, too, am running from death." "But that couldn't be. You are a god. Are not the gods immortal?" "Not quite. True, we are immune to the chills and accidents that swallow up humanity, but gods can die. We live only so long as people believe in us." I never thought of that," said Alabar. "But certainly for the likes of you there is no shortage of believers." Despite Pan's bedraggled curls and matted wool, despite the drool in the goatee and the manure on his hooves, he was by far the most impressive being Alabar had ever met. "Ha! Where hast thou spent thy life, Alabar? In a pumpkin? Did you just fall off a turnip cart?" "I am an eater of beets," proclaimed Alabar proudly. "How could such an ignoramus ever hath been a king? Doth thy people reside so far back in the sticks that they never heard the famous voice crying out over the wine-dark sea, 'Great Pan is dead, great Pan is dead'? Of course that was nearly a millennium ago, and as even a lout such as thou can see, I am still kicking. Nevertheless, with the birth of Christ, belief in me dwindled, and I have been scrambling for my life ever since." "Yes, now that you mention it, the priests in our church did often refer to you as one of the false deities. In fact, the way he described the devil, the silly man believes that there is but one God and one demon, he could be your twin." "Thou art Christian?" Pan pronounced the word with such contempt that the flock stopped dancing and glared at Alabar. The bees buzzed angrily at him, and a passing butterfly shat upon him with remarkable accuracy. "Oh, no, no," said Alabar hurriedly, wiping the green butterfly poop from the corner of his eye. "Not really. I merely played along with my neighbors to assuage their suspicions. This fellow Christ is a bit namby-pamby for my taste, and now that I hear what he's done to you, why, I like him the less, even if he did favor individualism." "Thou ninny!" "Sir, I will not have you calling me a nanny." "Ninny, not nanny. Doth thou think I would call thee after one of the things I love best?" Pan's heavy lids drooped momentarily as his thoughts strayed to other pastures on other days, days when the petal-pink genitals of the she-goats drew him down from the crags. "Just the same," Alabar's fist was about his knife. "If thou wouldst outdistance death, don't blow thy slender lead by challenging a god, neither Christ, who is not here to defend himself, nor I, who art much closer than I need be to smite a prideful gnat such as thee." With a disagreeable thump, Alabar landed on his chin again. Pan had not moved a muscle. "Namby-pamby, huh? Christ said that illumination is found only by putting everything one has in jeopardy. Thou, of all humans, should understand the courage that is required to reject the secure blessings of society in order to woo the unpredictable ecstasies of the solitary soul. It is true that Christ had little enthusiasm for dance or copulation, that he took right and wrong too seriously, and set himself apart from the natural world. But for all his shortcomings, he was much superior to thou mortals, who hath embraced him to further thine own ends." Although Alabar was no more fond of criticism than of being flung to the ground like a peach pit, he had learned from the shaman that the path to the marvelous is sometimes cleared by a sharp tongue, and when Pan began to move away, intimating that their conversation was done, Alabar hastened to draw him back. "Tell me, Horned One," he called, "why do you defend Christ if he is threatening your hide?" The god paused, assuming a haunchy stance, like a woman in high heels. Instead of replying, however, he produced reed pipes and blew through them in a manner that caused the sheep to skip again, and the little clouds to wiggle in the sky. The music was high-pitched and playful, a frail, tremulous, silvery sound that unfurled in lazy spirals, without a care in the world. So immense was the contrast between this light-hearted piping and Pan's demeanor, his crude simian features and great sad eyes, that Alabar was moved in spite of himself. And when at last the music ceased, he knocked away a tear with his knuckles and said, "For you, sir, may the jaws of death have cotton teeth." "For thee as well," answered Pan. "But how can we toast without strong wine to lift? And thou did announce thy hunger so emphatically that even the deaf roots took note. I'll wager thou be horny into the bargain. Come with me, Alabar, for while we must go forever in despair, let us also go forever in the enjoyment of the world." In a flash, Pan was across the pasture, Alabar at his heels, scaling the rugged rocks, oblivious to the thickets of violet thistles. Alabar was physically fit, hardened by his peasant labor and recent travels, but he could not keep pace with the god, and soon Pan was out of sight. That was no real problem, however, for Alabar simply followed the scent, that effluvium of goat glands that hung in the air like a salty mist, and drew him ever higher up the craggy vertebrae. The higher Alabar climbed, the more piercing his unease, until he was in a literal state of panic. Just when this thrilling anxiety was at its zenith, tempting him with irrational impulses to throw himself from the cliffs, he heard girlish voices and the sound of splashing water. The panic completely vaporized as the pan odor led him into a grotto, a ferny recess in the middle of which was a pellucid pool. Enjoying the liquid pleasures of the pool were 7 or 8 unusual human females, short in stature, though full in contour, their bones packed into loaves of ivory and petunia, their tangled hair hanging like ropes of seaweed nearly to their heels, their perfect nipples as red as guinea pig eyes, their squeals the kind that leave a glow in the dark, and not one of them older than the teenage foal he'd left in Elfric. Sweet genital sparks flew when they looked at Alabar, and he sensed himself in company most benevolent. Directly across the pool, in the mouth of a shallow cave, hunkered Pan, a wineskin in one fist, an erection in the other. In a rough clay bowl at his feet, dangerously close to the sizzling bulb of his member, were olives, figs, and feta cheese. With a jerk of his head, the god beckoned. Alabar was famished, but in order to reach the food and drink, he had to wade through nymph-infested waters. Summoning his nerve, he plunged in. Brunch time in Arcadia. The remainder of the day was spent in luxurious pastel stupor, against which Alabar's northern temperament rebelled in vain. He had expected the nymphs to be quite wild in their demonstrations. Imagine them biters, scratchers, and screamers. Yet neither as king nor serf had he known such delicacy, and the softness in which the pleasures of the afternoon were couched made the hero in him a bit embarrassed. When he glanced about him in the pale twilight, however, he saw everywhere evidence of his participation. Dried semen frosted the thighs of napping nymphs. Clots of it floated in the shadowy waters like weavings wrenched loose from the looms of the trout, and upon the tips of bracken there glistened drops too milky to be dew. It couldn't have been Pan's output alone, because Alabar's were as flat and juiceless as trampled grapes. Besides, after an hour's eventful splash in the pool, Pan had crawled into the cave and fallen into a lengthy snooze, from which the purring ecstasies of the nymphs were much too low to wake him. "Pan is not well," the nymphs confided.
I watched him scale the rocks. I watched him set 4 of you to coming in a row, said Alabar. He seems fit enough to me. The nymphs released a chorus of dreamy sighs. Oh, you should have seen him when he was in his prime. He's like a sick dove nowadays compared to the goat he used to be. Is it Christ who is making him weak? Not Christ, but Christians. With every advance of Christianity, his powers recede, said one nymph. It started long before Christ, said a second. Yes, it did, agreed the first. It began with the rise of the cities. There simply was no place in the refined temples of Attica and Sparta for a mountain goat like Pan. A third nymph, who with a wad of leaves was scrubbing herself clean of caked secretions, joined in. It was man's jealousy of woman that started it, she said. They wanted to drive the goddesses out of Olympus and replace them with male gods. Is not Pan a male god? Asked Alabar. True, he is, but he is associated with female values. To diminish the worth of women, men had to diminish the worth of the moon. They had to drive a wedge between human beings and the trees and beasts and waters, because trees and beasts and waters are as loyal to the moon as to the sun. They had to drive a wedge between thought and feeling, between the lamplight by which they count the day's earnings and the dark to which our Pan is ever connected. At first they used Apollo as the wedge, and the abstract logic of Apollo made a mighty wedge indeed. But Apollo the artist maintained a love for women, not the open, unrestrained lust that Pan has, but a controlled longing that undermined the patriarchal ambition. When Christ came along, Christ, who slept with no female, neither two-legged nor four, Christ, who played no musical instrument, recited no poetry, and never kicked up his heels by moonlight, this Christ was the perfect wedge. Christianity is merely a system for turning priestesses into handmaidens, queens into concubines, and goddesses into muses. And who can guess into what it will turn us nymphs? Alabar felt a surge of beet-red temper. Violently he shook his head. The world is changing, he said, but there will always be a place in it for you, and for Pan. Perhaps. Certainly we wish the moderns no harm, though Pan plays roughly with them at times. And thou? Wilt thou escape the fate thy feareth? You misunderstand me. I do not fear death. I resent it. Everything must die, apparently, and I am no exception. But I want to be consulted. You know what I mean? Death is impatient and thoughtless. It barges into your room when you are right in the middle of something, and it doesn't bother to wipe its boots. I have a new passion, my darlings, a passion for being myself, and for being more than previously has been manifested for a single lifetime. I am determined to die at my own convenience. Therefore, I journey to the east, where I have been told there are men who have taught death some manners. We suspect thou art as foolish as brave, Alabar. In fact, bravery may be naught but foolishness. Fear, like love, is a call into the wild, into the deep, shadowy grotto. Fear is a finer thing than resentment. Resentment, an affliction of the mind, will leave thee complaining in Christ's well-lighted halls. But fear, a wisdom of the body, will lead thee back to Pan. While Alabar was thinking that over, Pan awoke, stretched, and scampered into the thistles. When, with the sun setting, he did not return, Alabar gave the nymphs a last squeeze and began his long, laborious descent, during which he several times heard thunderous laughter ring round about him, and once thought he saw a moonbeam strike, high up in the crags, a fleeting horn. Alone, with not so much as a sperm left to accompany him, Alabar again directed his steps toward the east.
His was the gait of expectation, a pace set more by intuition than by reason, a clip fueled more by vague hints of wonderment than by steady assessments of purpose. He was to continue in that fashion for an inappropriately long stretch of literary time, passing through more landscapes than there are keys on a typewriter, having more adventures than there are nibs for pens. Not once during or following a perilous escapade did it occur to him that the unpredictability of the moment of one's death might provide life with its necessary tension. But ever mindful of the kin of Pan, whose memory no encounter, however dramatic, could obscure, he allowed himself to resent death less and fear it more. And as he passed through one exotic environment after another, learning languages, wearing out boots, he sang his little song, I love the ground, oh, a ball beneath my feet. The world is round, oh, just like a frigging beat. No, he would not be remembered as bard, nor for that matter as warrior or king. Life is fair, however, and in the fragrance industry, his name would one day become an accepted part of the nomenclature. According to Priscilla, the genius waitress, an alabar is a unit of measurement that describes the rate at which Old Spice aftershave lotion is absorbed by the lace on crotchless underpants. Although at other times, she has defined it as the time it takes Chanel No. 5 to evaporate from the wingtips of a wild duck flying backward.